The Tale of Engine opens Herbert's door in the wall. Arthur read George Wells' Branch of Lane. One evening, only 3 months ago, in confidence. Lionel Wallace told me this tale a while back about the wall-mounted door, and right then I thought from his vantage point. He delivered me the authentic narrative with real-life occurrences, including this basic simplicity of conviction that there was nothing else I could do but believe him. But first thing in the morning, in my own apartment, I awakened to a fresh surroundings while I slept and remembered what he had told me. Apart than the gloss of his earnest, sluggish speech devoid of the concentrated focused table light, the muted ambience that surrounds him, and the dessert and glasses are fantastic, and slumber of the supper we had together, transforming them into a bright little. The world is distant from daily living. Actuality. To be honest, I saw it all as I said. He was mystifying, and then his level of performance. It's not quite what I should do. Have anticipated that he, of all others, would. Good. As I sat up in bed thereafter, and I discovered myself sipping my morning tea, attempting to express the taste of information that perplexed me in his impossible recollections by supposing they did, in a sense, imply the present. Transmit. I barely know what to say. Experiences it would not have been possible otherwise. To be honest, I don't utilize that explanation. I've gone past my stepping in. Doubts I still hold as I did at when it was revealed that Wallace did strip to the best of his ability the reality of his secret for me, but if he witnessed it himself or just believed he could see if he was the owner of an incalculable luxury or the casualty of an incredible, I can't try to guess even the dreams, circumstances of his passing that put an end to my doubts. Never again shine any light on that much. The reader needs to form his own decision. I've forgotten what the chance comment was. My critique grew so restricted that I felt he was the perfect man to confide in me, sheltering himself from a false charge of my lethargy and untrustworthiness, made with a big public in mind. Movement where I was let down by him. However, he dove. He stated a preoccupation. All of a sudden, I am aware that he continued after pausing too, devoted to exploring his cigar, ash I. Been careless. The truth is that this isn't a case of apparitions or ghosts, yet it's a weird something to say about Redmond. I'm haunted. Something that rather haunts me. Eliminates the light from items that fill me with desires. He took a moment to check that English. The shyness that frequently takes over when we would talk relocation, graves, or lovely. Everything you did at St. Athel's stands. Through, he added, and briefly that appeared to me to be quite irrelevant, and he paused at that precise time. Initially haltingly, but later more. He started to describe the thing with ease. The haunting, which was hidden throughout his life. Recall of a wonderful and joyful moment had given him a voracious appetite for desires that provoked all of the attention, and the worldly life spectacle is uninteresting and conceded to him now that I've. The hint appears to be written, evident in his. I have a snapshot of the face that detachment's appearance has been captured and heightened. It makes me ponder about what he was previously characterized by a woman as having loved him very much, she said impulsively. He loses interest in it and forgets. He doesn't give a damn about you under his own nose, but the curiosity wasn't always absent between him and when he held his focus on an item Wallace may collaborate to become a big success. Indeed, man, his career is established with accomplishments he left me behind a long time ago. He flew above my head and formed a. I couldn't cut that figure in the world. Regardless, he was still 1 year away from becoming 40. Currently, they argue that he would have been in the new office and most likely in the cabinet had he resided at the school. He always defeated me, as it were, with little effort. Naturally, we were together at school at West St. Atherstons College. For practically all of our school days, Kensington when he entered the school as my co-equal, although he departed much above me in a burst of scholarships and performance, but I believe I did a fair job. Average running, and I heard that it happened at school. Introduction of the wall-mounted door. Things I would only hear about a second time. At least 1 month prior to his passing. The wall-mounted door was a genuine door, leading to a mortal via an actual wall. The fact that I'm now quite certain, and it invaded his life at a young age. When he was a tiny child, around 5 and 6, I recall how Dad sat while constructing his slow-gravity confession to me. He estimated the date of it and reasoned. He recommended a crimson Virginia creeper in a single, vivid uniform, in a transparent amber sunshine, crimson contrast opposed to a white wall that penetrated the impression in some manner, although I'm not definitely recall how, and there were leaves from horse chestnuts on the clean outside the greens pavement. They had green and yellow blotches on the door. You're not dirty or brown, so that they have to be brand new. Fallen, hence I presume that October I watch for the leaves of horse chestnuts every year, and I should be mindful of. If I recall right, I was roughly 5 years old and 4 months. He claimed to be highly precocious for his age. He began to speak as a little boy at an unusually young age, yet he was fully sane and archaic, as some consider. He was provided free to exercise some initiative that the majority of youngsters hardly ever attain by 7 or 8. His mother passed away at birth, and he was exposed to the less observant and a nursery governor's authoritative care. His father was a stern who was obsessed with attorney who paid little attention to him and anticipated him to do well for all of his brightness. He discovered that life was pretty gray, extremely uninteresting, I believe, until one day he, wandering, unable to recollect the specific irresponsibility that permitted him to escape or the path he followed amid the streets of West Kensington, which had trapped in the inescapable mist of recollection, but the green and the white wall. The door was clearly visible, as his memories of that distant childish. He did his first experience run. When you see the door, you have a peculiar feeling, attraction, and a desire to reach the door, open it, enter, and proceed to. He also possessed the most distinct opinion that either it was ridiculous or he was dumb to be unable to tell, which he must give in to this pull. Maintained that it was an exceptional that he was aware from the start, unless he has been deceived by memory, that the door was relaxed, allowing him to penetrate as he chose to think. I could see the figure of that. The young boy was drawn and disgusted, and it was quite clear to him as well, but why it should be so, but it was never clarified. His dad would be upset if he entered the entrance Wallace had mentioned. All of these hesitating phases for me has the highest particularity. He instantly passed the door, and after that he held his pockets and, striving in a youthful manner, whistling, they walked straight ahead. The conclusion of the wall there, he remembers numerous harsh, filthy enterprises, notably that of a decorator and plumber with a dusty earth's fragility, and the battle pipes, sheet low ball taps, wallpaper pattern books, and he pretended to be grasping enamel tins. Examine these things and indulge in coveting, eagerly yearning the green door. Then he claimed to have been overcome with emotion, made a hasty getaway in case there was any reluctance. Embrace him once more, he got plump with a hand reached through the green door, then allow it to shatter behind him. So he entered the garden 3 times, which has plagued every one of his. Wallace had a really hard existence to adequately describe the garden to me. When he arrived, there was something in that thrilling environment which made one feel lighter and fantastic advancements and well-being. There was something in the view that gave it all of its color. Neat, flawless, and discreet. sparkling in the moment of entrance. One was particularly thrilled because only in uncommon occasions, when one is young and this is something to be happy about. There, the world and everything were magnificent. Wallace considered for a bit before continuing. You see, he answered doubtfully. Voice of a man who pauses at amazing things. Yes, there were two great panthers present. Saw panthers, but I wasn't. Sadly, there was a big, broad passage showcasing floral borders with marble edges on either side, along with these two big, velvety beasts. We're having fun there with a ball. One raised his head and approached me. A little unusual, as it appeared to. Massaged its silky round ear right up to me. Fairly lovingly against the little hand I reached out and purred. I'll tell you something. Enchanted. I am aware of the size of the garden. Spread extensively in both directions. I believe there were hills in the distance. Where in heavens did West Kensington have unexpectedly arrived at, and it seemed to be coming somehow. Music. Home, you are aware of the exact minute the door behind me swung, and I forgot the walk with its leaves of fallen chestnuts. I forgot about cabs and tradesmen's carts. Gravitational pull that returns to the obedience and discipline at home. I forgot all hesitancies and anxieties. Discretion dismissed all the personal, the truths of this life. I found myself in a moment of immense joy and wonder. In a distant reality, the youngster was a warmer planet with a special quality. Softer, more penetrating light with. There was a faint, palpable delight in the air and clouds in the blessing that have been touched by the sun of its sky and ran this far ahead of me. Spacious, lovely route with weed-free beds. Both sides are abundant in untended flowers as well as these two fantastic. I put my small hands on the panthers, boldly on their velvety fur, and their round ears were rubbed, and the delicate regions beneath their ears, and toyed with them, and it appeared like they greeted me. There was a strong awareness of homecoming in my thoughts, and at the moment, there was a tall, fair girl in the walkway, and arrived to greet me with a smile, and stated, well to me, lifted me up and gave me a kiss, and lowered me, then guided me by the hand. There wasn't wonder, but merely a sensation of the joyful correctness of being recalled, of delightful goods that were in some odd way bin. I didn't realize there were enormous steps I recall that appeared between delphinium spikes, and up these we found a nice avenue between incredibly old and dreary darkness. You know, there are trees all along this route. In between the red stems that were chapped were marble chairs of pride and distinction, and very beautiful and pleasant white. Along this avenue, my doves. I recall my girlfriend guiding me to look down the lovely lines and the expertly modeled. The chin of her lovely, compassionate face asks, in a quiet, pleasant tone, ask me questions, and sharing nice things with me that I comprehend what they were, but I was never capable of. Remember, and now, a little capy chin. Very clean monkey, with Reddy's fur. Hazel eyes, dark and gentle, came down a tree to us and rushed near to me while gazing up at me, smiled, and then sprang to my shoulder, so we proceeded inside. Enormous joy, he stopped, and I continued, saying keep in mind the minor things. An old guy was considering amongst laurels, I recall, and an area with homosexual people. Bird, and came from a huge shady colonnade to a big, elegant palace that is crammed with gorgeous, fantastic fountains laden with beauty, things that are high quality and promising, of the heart's desire, and a bunch of stuff, and innumerable persons, some of whom still appeared to obviously stand out, and some that are a somewhat vague. However, each of these individuals was beautiful, fantastic, and I'm not sure how, but it was kind in some sort. Told me they were all friendly. I'm delighted to be there and filled. I'm delighted with their acts by the soothing touch of their hands and affection in their eyes. He thought for a moment. Playmates, which I discovered there, were greatly to me as I was feeling lonely. They played fun activities with the young child. In a court with grass cover, where a Sue dial was surrounded by flowers, and as one played one, adored yet weirdly I feel a void in my. I can't recollect the games we played. I didn't recollect afterward as. I spent endless hours as a child striving even. Sobbing to recollect the form of that delight. I wanted to repeat it repeatedly. Once more in my nursery alone, no one else. Keep in mind the thrill, and two, my love. The playmates that I spent the most time with back then. Finally, a serious, ebony woman appeared with dreamy eyes and a sad, pallid face. Gloomy woman in a long, silky robe of pale purple with a book in hand and beckoned and led me and her off into a gallery above a corridor, but my playmates didn't want me to leave, and they stopped playing and observed as I was taken away and returned to us. Come back to us, I cried. I rapidly peered up at her face. However, she ignored them utterly, was really delicate and sad, and she brought me too. I took a seat next to someone in the gallery. She was prepared to examine her book as the pages tumbled out when she opened it on her knee. She gestured open, and I gazed in disbelief. Because within the book's living pages, I saw myself, and it was a tale about myself. And it featured everything that had occurred to me ever since I was. I thought it was amazing when it was born, because there were no illustrations on the pages of that book. I get it, but reality's Wallace stopped and gazed sadly at me. Doubtfully continue, I stated. Recognize that they were. Indeed, they had to have been human beings. Moved and stuff entered and departed them. I had almost forgotten about my wonderful mother. Afterward, my father was upright and stern. The nursery, the personnel, and all the familiar items from home, followed by the front door and the packed, traffic-filled streets. I glanced back and forth, astonished, and gazed again, with some suspicion, into the woman's face, then flipped the pages, ignoring this and that in order to witness more. This book and more, so I eventually came, apprehensive and hesitant, to myself. In the long white outside the green door wall, and once more sensed the fight and the dread, after which I sobbed and would have triggered, but the grave's cool hand. The woman was late. I then persisted and quietly struggled, pulling up her fingers with her hand, with every ounce of my immature power, and as she bowed when the page approached, dropped like a shadow on me, and planted a kiss on my brow, but the webpage failed to display neither the panthers nor enchanted garden. Neither did the girl who had guided me by the hand. The friends who had been so reluctant to let me leave. A long, dreary street loomed in West Kensington during that peaceful period of before the lamps are illuminated in the afternoon, and was there an unhappy tiny person there? Sobbing out loud for something I could do to contain myself, and I started crying. As I was unable to return back to my beloved, the playmates who had called after me arrived back to us as fast as possible. This was not a page from a book, but sad truth of the amazing sight, and the grave mother's restrained hand, whose knee I was standing at had. Have they gone with me? He halted once more and stared for a time into the misery of that return fire. Well, I mumbled after a minute or, poor little wretch, I was returned to this gloomy world once more as I came to terms with the richness of my experience. I surrendered to an excruciating melancholy, and the embarrassment and disgrace of that. Public sobs and my embarrassing. Stay with me for homecoming. I continued to observe the kind-looking older man wearing gold eyeglasses who ceased talking to me and nudging me. First, unhappy little chap, with his umbrella. He said, "Are you lost now?" And me, he must be a London boy who is at least 5 years old. Must bring in a kind young police officer. They convert me into a multitude, so I march crying loudly and afraidly at home. From the enchanted garden, I traveled to the steps going to my father's home, which is as well as I recall my vision of that. The garden that still troubles me. Naturally, I am unable to express any of it. Unfathomable clear quality. Unexpectedness that differs from the typical stuff from experience that hung about everything, but that's what transpired. I'm positive it was a dream. Was during the day and fully
Extraordinary. Dream.
Of course, there was a dreadful my father and my aunt's interrogation. The governor's nurse. I attempted to warn everyone of my first rebuke from my father was for
Revealing.
falsehoods when I subsequently attempted to share my aunt. She disciplined me once more for my terrible perseverance, so like I stated earlier, everyone was banned from listening to me in order to hear even my fairy tale books mention it, were briefly removed from me. Since I was also creative, certainly they did. That my dad was from the old. My stories and school were hurled back upon. I uttered it to my pillow in a whisper. Cushion that frequently gets soggy and salty. My childish whispering lips. Tears, and I repeatedly added to my official. And this one with less fervent prayers. Sincere. Please, God, provide me the opportunity to dream of the garden. Please transfer me back to my own garden. Returning to my garden, which I often dreamed of. I might have added to the garden, have affected it. I am oblivious of any of this. You recognize that this is an effort to assemble from foggy memories a pretty early encounter between that and the other. Continuous recollections of my childhood spent there.
Is a
abyss of time arrived when it appeared. I should never mention it since it is impossible. A look at wonder. I asked the same question again, but he stated, I don't recall ever. Tried to navigate my way back to the in those early years. The garden appeared too weird today, but I imagine that very most likely a tighter eye was maintained on my activities followed this mishap to stop me from departing. No, it wasn't until you got to know me that it wasn't. That I made another attempt at the garden, and I suppose there was a time as amazing as I appear to have forgotten about the garden. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, do you recall me as a possible child at St. Athol stands instead of displaying any signs? Back when I had a secret, did I? He looked up in Dream Chapter 2 with a abruptly grin. Have you ever played Northwest Passage with me? No, you didn't, of course. Coming at my apartment, it was the kind of game he continued by adding that every imaginative child plays all day, and the discovering was the idea of a passage in the Northwest too. The route to school was easy. Sufficient. The game involved locating. In some way, it wasn't straightforward at first. 10 minutes before the hour in some nearly hopeless. Finding one's way and following directions. Over new streets to my destination. And I became embroiled with some one day. Comparably poor streets on the other side of Camp Hill, and I started to reflect. Anticipated the game would be against them for once. Me, and that I ought to come at school late. I frantically tried a roadway that revealed a passage and appeared to be a cul-de-sac. Ultimately, I rushed through that with renewed optimism. I'll do it, but I stated. I went by a stretch of weary little stores. Something I couldn't help but identify. Immediately my long white wall appeared, as well as the green door leading to the object that impacted the enchanted garden. After all, that garden that lovely garden wasn't a fiction. He paused. I guess my second encounter. The green door symbolizes the commencement of. There is a distinction between the busy, a schoolboy's life, and the limitless. In any case, a child's free time. This second time I wasn't even thinking about entering instantly. As you can see, my only thinking was enthusiastic about the idea of attending school in time restriction for retaining my record. Being on time must have made me feel a little minimal reason to attempt the door at least. Yes, I must have felt that experience, yet I appear to recall the door's allure largely as an extra hurdle to my immense willpower to reach. School I was captivated by. Naturally, I went with this discovery ID created. Despite having a lot on my mind, I proceeded. I rushed past the tugging without being checked. I had 10 minutes when I took out my watch, remaining to spare, and I was heading. Slipping into my familiar surrounds, I arrived at school panting, it's true, and sweating a lot, but soon I can. I recall hanging up my hat and coat, strangely passed it by, and left it behind me.
He flashed me a glance.
Thoughtfully, I was definitely ignorant that it wouldn't be present all the time. Schoolboys don't have much imagination. I believe I felt it was a bad. It's wonderful to have it there, so I can know my way back to it, but the school was there, pulling at me. I believed I was getting a terrific deal. Annoyed and agitated that morning, remembering what I could of the lovely, odd folks I should be seeing right now. Strangely enough, once more, I felt convinced of my keep in mind that they would welcome seeing. Yes, I must have considered the garden that morning as a joyous kind of location that one might go to in the parts of a demanding scholastic career. I didn't go at all that day. There was a half-holiday the following day, which would have considered me, possibly also my decreased state of inattention, urged me to do something and docked the time margin required for the detour. I don't. What I do know, though, is that in the enchanted garden, meantime, was so a lot on my mind that I couldn't maintain it too. I earnestly asked him what his name was. We used to call this young person who looked Hopkins at young Hopkins said.
I didn't want to tell him that I had considered that it was somehow against
the criteria to inform him, but I did, and he followed me on a chunk of the way home, was gregarious, and if we hadn't, regarding the enchanted garden, we ought to have discussed another topic, and it was, I find it unbearable to consider any other topic, so I blabbed wonderfully, and the next day he exposed my secret. During the play interval one day I noticed, in the company of 6 older boys, half teasing, half interested in hearing the enchanted garden in greater detail. Do you recollect that enormous foray? You, him, and Molly Reynolds and Carnaby weren't present by chance. No, I think if you were a lad, you ought to have remembered, is a creature of weird feelings, and I was honestly believed, despite my secret, a little happy to have self-discussed the attraction of these gigantic males. I recall in particular a time of happiness brought on by CAW's recognition of you. Recall Crawshaw's son, Ca Major. That was the best, according to the composer. He had never heard of falsehood before, yet at the same. There was a really uncomfortable underfoot at one point, of unease at articulating my feelings was. Indeed, the beast foretells a valued secret. Playfully characterized the girl in. With the keen, Green Wallace's voice faded. Recalling that, I regret pretending not to hear him. Responded. Well, and then Carnaby called out of the blue. Ooted with me and called me a young liar when I said that the item was. Yes, I did say I knew where to hunt for the. They might all enter through the green door. After 5 minutes, Carnaby became aggressively moral and stated that I would have to endure out what I've stated, or have you ever encountered Carnaby Twist?
Your
arm, then maybe you'll comprehend how. I pledged that my narrative was true. It's true that the school was empty at the time. To deploy CAW to save a man from Carnaby. Stated in a few words, the car had his game. I grew delighted, flushed, and I was a little apprehensive, so I behaved completely like a naive young chap, and the consequence of it was that rather than beginning, I led the magnificent garden by myself. Way now, with hot ears and flushed cheeks. My spirit is burning, and my eyes are smarting. Anguish and shame for a group of 6. Making fun of the inquisitive and dangerous school. We never discovered the White War, fellows, and... You mean the green door? I mean if I had been able to locate it, I would have. If I could, and when I could after that. Go alone, I was unable to locate it, and I never discovered it. I appear to have always searching for it with my schoolboy Days, but I haven't seen it since. Did the boys make it? Unpleasant. The gigantic Carnaby defended me. For deceit and desire. I recall how I snuck up the stairs and home to conceal the indicators that I was blubbering, but as I wept, I finally managed to sleep, albeit it wasn't long. Carnaby, but for the Holmes garden. Lovely afternoon that I had dreamed for. The waiting and the attractive, nice women. My pals, and the game I was hoping to. Remind yourself, remember that lovely forgotten game. I was persuaded that if I hadn't observed that I had hard times after sobbing at night and gathering wool throughout the day for I was lazy for 2 terms and had horrible. Do you recall any reports? Naturally, you would if it were you. Excelling me in math, which brought returning to the grind. Once more in chapter 3, my spouse stared silently for a time into the fire's scarlet core. Then he mentioned that I didn't see it again till I was 17 for the 3rd time. It jumped on me while I was on my way to Paddington by automobile to Oxford, NA. Scholarship. I only had 1 short term. A peak. I was bending over my apron. Attractive man puffing on a cigarette and not questioning myself, believing that I am a guy of the planet, and all of a sudden there was the door, the wall, and the delightful impression of memorable and still reachable items we clattered past, and I was also pleased by unexpectedly pausing my taxi till we were. Well, after going around a corner, I had Divergent, a replica, and a queer moment. I tapped the little with a movement of my will door in the taxi's roof and brought. Yes, sir. I placed my arm down to take out my watch. The cabman said, well, it's nothing. I cried my heart out. Error. We don't have much time left, and he continued, I received my scholarship and after hearing that, I sat down that evening in my tiny top chamber over my fire. Studies with my father in his house. Praise his tone and his infrequent praises. My ears are ringing with counsels, and I smoked the formidable, which is my favorite pipe. Adolescent bulldog, and considered the long white walls door. If I had stopped, I believed I ought to have. I should have won my scholarship, but I missed it. Missed Oxford. Perplexed. Everything. Career ahead of me. I start to notice. I should have reflected more profoundly, but I did. Without a doubt, then, my career was something that was worthy. Give up those close pals. And that. I thought the pure environment was very amazing. Exceedingly sensitive, yet my hold was healing. I noticed another door on the planet now. Opening my career, he peered into the fire once again. Its red light identified an obstinate power in his face for a single flickering moment before fading. Once more. Well, he murmured, sighing, I have done a lot of work during that career. A lot of effort, but I've dreamed of 1,000 dreams in Enchanted Garden and seen, or at least had a look of its door. Since then, the door has been opened 4 times. There were occasions when this world was so educated, fascinating, and appeared so full of relevance and chance that the half destroyed the garden's charm by comparison. That is mild. And who wants to watch the Panthers on the remote? Heading to supper with stunning women and men of distinction. I traveled from Oxford to London as a guy. Of the lofty vow I made. Something to make something better, but there have been disappointments I've encountered twice. I won't linger on that, love, but once I approached someone I knew had doubts whether I was brave enough to attend. I took a shortcut at a business venture via an unused road next to Earl's Court, and that took place on a white wall and a recognizable green door. Strange, I thought to myself, but the location was on Campden Hill. I was never able to locate anything like counting. The location of that LGBT individual is Stonehenge. I went by the intent of my daydream. For my objectives, I didn't find it appealing. That. In the afternoon, I had a short inclination. 3 steps away, we tried the door. Required at most, but I was certain enough within my heart to allow it to me, and I later believed that doing so might cause me to be late getting there. Appointment where I was recognized was involved later. I apologized for my being on time could have at least garnered a glance. I waved a hand to those and thought Panthers, but by now I knew enough not to late and seek for that which is not located by. At that time, I felt fairly miserable for hoping yes. Years of rigorous labor followed, and never a perspective of the door that was only barely. It has returned to. With it, I've developed a sense of, despite the fact that a mild tarnish had spread across my universe, I started to think it as a sad and bitter thing that door should never be seen by me again. Maybe I was a little ill, because overwork, maybe that's what I've heard referred to as the feeling of 40. I'm not sure. No, but the intense brightness is plainly that eases the stress has evolved from recent events, and that only at a moment. Considering all of these recent political developments while I should be at work. Strange, isn't it? Yet I do start to investigate life. As I come closer to them, the toilsome rewards. Inexpensive I started desiring a little while ago. Yes, the garden is in terrible state, and I've seen it's 3. Sometimes the garden doesn't have a door, so having not sat at the table during Lent, to me with a tremendous deal of grief in his voice when he said, since I've had my chance 3 times, if that door ever opens itself to me once more, and I vowed to enter away from this dust and this heat, out of them, the dry glitter of vanity. I'll leave these worthless futilities behind and never. I vowed to return this time and remain. And I didn't when the time came. Have I passed after attending 3 times in a single year? That door, and didn't get inside 3 times throughout the past 12 months. The initial incidents occurred on the evening of the snatching the tenants division. Redemption law that the government is considering was salvaged by a 3-person majority. Keep in mind that nobody is on our side, perhaps extremely few people on the other side anticipated the conclude that evening. The debate broke down. Similar to eggshells, Hotchkiss and I were at Brentford while eating with his cousin. We were called up after we were both unpaired over the phone and soon left in his. We arrived barely in time to take up our cousin's motor. As we passed my wall en route, door pallid in the blotched moonlight, blazing yellow like our eyeballs flash. It was illuminated by lights, notwithstanding. Clearly, my God cried. I said Hotchkiss, but I didn't answer. And the time went by. I made a wonderful. As I entered, I told the whip, sacrifice. He answered, they all have, and I hurried by. I don't see what else I could have done. Then and the subsequent instance was as I hurried to the side of my father's bed to inform. That stern old man said goodbye, and then the life's claims were essential, but the 3rd example was unique. It occurred a week ago. Makes me feel guilty to think about it. Was with Ralph's and Gerkier, yet it's not secret. You are now aware that I have had my chat with Gurka, where we had been eating fish, and the conversation had grown close. Between us, the problem of where I fit in the reconstructed ministry was always there, just beyond the discussion's limits. Yes, it is all resolved. It doesn't have to be mentioned yet, but there's no excuse. Thank you, to keep a secret from you. Thank you, but first, allow me to explain my tale. That evening, things were really in. My position in the air was exceedingly delicate. I was extremely excited to acquire some unequivocal declaration from Gurka, but Ralph's presence inhibited me, so I was hiring my brain's strongest ability to keep that light and carefree talking, not too explicitly designed to illustrate the idea that I was anxious about Ralph's behavior, considering that it has more than validated my. Ralph was careful, and I knew he would forsake us outside of Kensington High Street, and then I may unexpectedly surprise Gerkier. Sometimes being honest is the only option. These little gadgets, and after that it was that on the limit of my eyesight, I became mindful of the white wall once more. Green door ahead of us along the road, and we spoke as we passed by it. I went by it, can still make out Girk's shadow. His opera hat was slanted in marked profile. Across his big nose, the innumerable. His neck stretches in folds before my Ralph's and shadows as we strolled. I went by within 20 feet of the door. If I bid them good night and enter, I wondered what would happen, and I was filled with a cold at that word. Girkier, I was unable to respond to that query. Within the complexity of my other difficulties, they will think I'm mad, I assumed. I fade now, the stunning disappearance of a well-known politician who considered. Petty, you have my undying thanks. Worldliness struck me in that way. Crises, following which he fooled me with a speaking slowly and smirking sorrowfully. Here I am, he repeated. I've lost my chance 3 times. The door has been offered to me in a year. The door leading to tranquility. Enjoy a beauty that goes beyond dreaming. No one on earth can understand kindness, and Redmond, you've rejected it and it's gone. How can you tell that I am aware that I have been left? Now to figure out how to keep on task. That provided me with such tremendous support during my. Did you just claim that I'm this successful? I have the annoyingly envied thing, Tor. Held in his big hand a walnut if that was, he said, my success, and destroyed it. Waited for me to. Redmond, let me tell you something. For 2 reasons this loss is ruining me. Months for about 10 weeks now I've completed nothing but the most essential and demanding obligations. My spirit is packed with a nape. Regrets during the evenings when it is less probable. When I step out, I'll be known. Wonder, yes, I do wonder, what persons may, if they knew a cabinet, ponder that. Minister, the accountable leader of that. Wandering in the most vital department. Grieving alone, sometimes almost audibly. Whining about the lack of a garden door. I can see now that chapter 4 is pretty pallid. Face and the peculiar, melancholy fire that had entered his eyes. I see him fairly. Tonight, as I sit here, I remember his words, his tone, and the prior nights. I still have the Westman Gazette on my couch, with the announcement of his dying at. The club was concerned with his supper today. Death was the only thing we talked. Discovered his body early yesterday. Early in the morning at a deep dig close to East. There are 2 stations in Kensington. Shafts made in conjunction with a railway extension. It is shielded from the southward. Public encroachment through hoarding. Along the highway where a tiny, for ease, the entryway has been cut. Just a few laborers who reside in that direction of the doorway was left unfastened due to a miscommunication. Through it and between 2 gangsters he created his. How my head is clouded by investigation. And it appears that he walked all the. On the night he leaves the house he has often made the voyage home on foot in the past session, therefore I think that his dark form arrives late and vacant. Streets encased in tent before completing the pale electric. The rough is cheated by lights near the station, planking into what appeared to be white. Some were woken by that terrible unsecured door. Memory was present after all. I don't see the green door in the wall at all. Know that I have reported his account exactly as he did. 2. There are occasions when I feel like Wallace was only the casualty of the coincidence of a remarkable, but not unusual sort of hallucination and a thoughtless trap, but that isn't my deepest conviction. You could suppose I foolish and, if you will, superstitious. I am, nevertheless, more than half convinced. Believe he actually has an outstanding gift, with a sense I'm not sure what, that behind the pretense of a door and wall, gave him a means to express a secret and weird section of escape into another, and an all-around more beautiful world at. In any event, you would remark that it tricked him in the conclusion, but did you betray him there? Reach the deepest secret of these visionary men, dreamers, and the imagination. We imagine our environment as egalitarian, and the pit and hoarding are frequent. He left by our daylight standards of safety into the peril of darkness, and death, but did he consider it as that? If you like, thank you for listening. Our recordings, you might find this appealing, watching the video and following our channel so no more audiobooks are missed by you.